With a new Pokemon game just around the corner, what better time is there to rank all of the past Pokemon games that have been released over the past 29 years? Wild to think that this franchise is almost as old as I am. But let's go ahead and hop into it. So on this tier list, we do have 23 different titles to rank. Granted, 2 of them are technically spin-off games because they're GameCube games, but we'll include them anyway because they're fan favorites. But starting off with our S tier, the number 1 spot can only go to one game, and that has to be Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Not only do we get to go back to Kanto in this game, which obviously you could do in Gold and Silver as well, however, there was a ton of improvements that they made in these remakes that just make it better than the original games. For starters, we do get the physical and special split, which obviously since these are Gen 2 remakes, those didn't exist back in Gold and Silver. So already we have a huge quality of life update. On top of that, some Pokemon even got new evolutions in these remakes, like the Togepi line getting Togekiss, and the Swinub line getting Mamoswine. They also fleshed out some of the characters like the Kimono Girls, Team Rocket, added some mini-games, and of course added some new TMs, all of which just made the game a lot easier to play. But some of the biggest changes had to be, number 1, the Safari Zone, where you were now able to get Larvitar not at the post-game. You could just go into the Safari Zone and get it earlier so that you don't have to try to grind levels in order to use your Tyranitar against Red at the end of the game. And even then, you only get to use it in one battle. So you are able to get a pseudo-legendary much earlier in the game so that you can use it throughout your playthrough, since you no longer have to wait until Mount Silver. And most importantly, when you are going through the Kanto region, unlike the Gold and Silver games, where everybody was super underleveled and you couldn't really train your Pokemon before you have to go to Mount Silver and face Red, and then proceed to get clapped because your team is underleveled, but they updated the Elite Four in this game so they're higher levels, so that you can actually have a chance to train up your Pokemon so that you don't get wrecked by Red. Now, I realize that I should have said this before I even started the S tier, but I actually only have 2 games that are going in S tier, and the number 2 spot has to go to Black and White 2, which in my opinion, the Black and White games were so overhated when they came out, mostly because of the whole Pokedex thing, but Black and White 2 kind of fixes a lot of that, since unlike Black and White, where you only had the regional Pokedex until the post-game, Black and White 2 added about 150 Pokemon to the actual base game, giving us a Pokedex of around 300 Pokemon for the Unova region. We also are getting a brand new story, which I think is really cool since these are technically not like remakes, they're sequels, which add on to the original story in the game. And this game actually lets you earn difficulty settings, which is a huge thing since a lot of people complain that Pokemon games are too easy for them. Granted, they are for kids, so just keep that in mind. But you are able to unlock a challenge mode to make your playthrough a little bit harder. Some Pokemon even got new forms, like the Forces of Nature getting their Therian forms, and there is a little bit of a larger focus on Kyurem. I know I'm gonna get roasted for how I pronounce his name. I don't care. I'm not calling it Kyurem. But I think the biggest and best upgrade that they made from Black and White to Black and White 2 had to be the World Tournament, which is a little 8-person tournament where you're able to face past gym leaders, champions, and even characters from the previous games, which literally makes replayability so much better. So I think these 2 games specifically stand out above all the other games just because of the content that they provide, as well as all of the quality of life updates that they provide. Moving on to A tier. For the number 1 spot, we are going to put Pokemon Platinum. Am I biased? Yes, this is my favorite game. So just be happy that I didn't put it in S tier, because I could have, but I'm trying to be impartial here. But when it comes to Pokemon Platinum, once again, it's the content that's added from the original Diamond and Pearl games that just makes it so much better. For starters, you get an entire new storyline in Platinum versus Diamond and Pearl that introduces Giratina, and you literally have to go take a field trip to the Distortion World, not to mention Giratina literally just jump scaring everybody. But of course, the biggest improvement had to be the Battle Frontier. which of course added the Battle Tower, which is my personal favorite as a battler, the Battle Factory, the Battle Arcade, the Battle Castle, and the Battle Hall, all of which you could obviously battle in to earn prizes, which made the postgame so much more enjoyable and of course made the replayability of the game that much better. Not to mention, of course, more quality of life updates like the text speed and the surf speed going faster, which just made it overall a much better game than the original Diamond and Pearl games. At the number 2 spot in A tier, we are going to go ahead and put Fire Red and Leaf Green. Once again, I am a little biased with this one because it is one of my favorite games, and considering that I am technically older than Pokemon, obviously I'm a slight Gen 1er, so I am a sucker for any Gen 1 remake. And I mean, it's obviously not very hard to improve on the original Gen 1 games. I mean, they did come out in the late 90s, and they were in black and white. So overall, Fire Red and Leaf Green are just a gigantic improvement due to all of the quality of life updates, the updated graphics since obviously it was on a newer console, updating the mechanics to be more modern, like adding abilities, natures, and of course the physical and special split, and of course the addition of new content in the post-game like the Sevi Islands and the Trainer Tower, which is north of Seven Island. So not only are you getting all of the more modern features of a Pokemon game in Fire Red and Leaf Green, but you're also getting more post-game content. And of course nostalgia also has a role to play because like I said, I am kind of a sucker for Gen 1 games as well. At number 3, we are going to go ahead and put Emerald. And the reason that Emerald is in A tier is kind of the same reason that Platinum is in A tier. It just improves upon everything that was in Ruby and Sapphire. You get a new story where you have to stop Groudon and Kyogre from fighting, so both the evil teams are at fault. And obviously you have to go awaken Rayquaza so that they don't destroy the entire world. You could also catch Kyogre and Groudon in this game, and you had a choice whether you wanted Latios or Latios to roam around for you to catch. And of course, the biggest change to the post-game has to be the Battle Tower, which in Emerald became the Battle Frontier, where you are of course able to go to any of these 7 battle facilities and fight the Frontier Brains, which once again just makes this game that much better than the originals of Ruby and Sapphire because of all of the updated post-game content. Now for the final A tier game, this one is probably going to ruffle some feathers, but I am gonna go ahead and put Sword and Shield at A tier. Now once again, I am a little bit biased because this was the first game that I had on the Nintendo Switch, and it was also the game where I learned how to Eevee and Ivy train my Pokemon, which I think is a huge reason as to why this game should be an A tier, since it made training your Pokemon for competitive battles so much easier than all of the previous games. So this was kind of the start to the explosion in popularity of competitive Pokemon that we're seeing today. Not only that, but I think that this is one of the most visually stunning games that they have produced, at least in the modern years, and the customization in this game is amazing, which is something that a lot of the new games severely lack. I'm looking at you, Scarlet and Violet. Not to mention it added a ton of new Pokemon that personally I love. And when it comes to modern Pokemon games, this one feels the most similar to the previous mainline games from the previous consoles. I know that games have to change and evolve and grow as time passes, but it is nice to have just like a basic, more linear Pokemon game to be able to replay and just have a cozy game to play while you're curled up on the couch with a nice cup of tea, maybe with a TV show in the background. And maybe I do that quite often. But I think the game is really easy when it comes to replayability, and of course when it comes to the DLCs, there's a ton of extra content, especially in the Dynamax raids, where you are able to find other legendary Pokemon that you previously couldn't obtain unless you had the older games. So quality of life, accessibility, replayability, visuals, customization, there's a lot of things that I love about this game. Not to mention the music is some of the best that we've heard. Moving on to B tier, however. Number 1 slot in B tier is going to go to the original Black and White games. I'm putting this at B tier mostly because of the fact that you weren't able to get any Pokemon that were outside of the regional decks until the post-game. However, I still think that these were really fun games, and it has a different storyline than the sequels, which means that it is fun to go back and play the original story. So no complaints about this game, solid B tier, would play it again, however I would also prefer to play the sequels. However, the music is also great in these games, so I will go back and play it just because of the music as well. At the number 2 slot, we are going to go ahead and put X and Y. Now when it comes to X and Y, one of my favorite features is going to be the fact that there is a ton of character customization in this game as well, which like I said, in modern games we severely lack. So I did like that you were able to change like your hair color, your outfits to whatever you want it to look like. You could just be a fashionista. I will say it does get a couple of points knocked because obviously it is a 3DS game, and me personally, I'm not the biggest fan of them moving to the 3D models of Pokemon and the sprites. Personally, I would pick sprites over 3D models any days, even for modern Pokemon games, so it does get a couple of points knocked off for that. However, thanks to the customization and of course the introduction of one of my favorite legendary Pokemon, Xerneas, we're not talking about Yveltal, it looks like a piece of bacon, I think that it deserves a solid B. And of course, how could I forget that X and Y introduced us to the fan favorite gimmick, Mega Evolution, which people have been begging for to come back. Lucky for us, like I mentioned in my intro, we have a new Pokemon game coming out, Pokemon Legends ZA, which will reintroduce Mega Evolutions and continue the story in Kalos. I will say, however, that I do wish that more Pokemon, if not all Pokemon, were able to Mega Evolve just to make it a little bit more balanced. But I did like the fact that they gave some forgotten Pokemon Mega Evolutions like Kangaskhan. When was the last time you thought about Kangaskhan outside of Mega Evolution? So I do love that. Now for the number 3 spot, I am going to go ahead and put a spin-off game here and put Pokemon Colosseum here. Now obviously this game is a fan favorite spin-off for a reason. The story is great. You're literally going around and trying to save all the Pokemon whose hearts have been corrupted. Adorable. Not to mention, my favorite Pokemon in the entire world is a starter in this game, which is of course my girl Espeon. And of course you can also pick Umbreon, but in my opinion Umbreon's a little overrated. I love all Eevees equally, however I will say that my girl Espeon is slept on, at least when she's next to her sibling. But Espeon being a starter may or may not be a reason why it's all the way up in B tier. Leave me be. Let me have this. Moving on to C tier, in the first place slot in C tier, we are going to go ahead and put Ruby and Sapphire in here for all of the reasons I mentioned that Emerald is better. But I think overall Ruby and Sapphire are great games. I had a really good time playing through them, and I'm still traumatized by the trainer with the Milotic that was in that little rainy area. My very underleveled team that had no electric types was not very happy to see that Milotic, and we did proceed to scurry over to the Pokemon Center after whiting out, maybe multiple times. But I think it is a solid game in general, considering that it doesn't have all of the upgrades that Emerald has. Like Latios and Latias are split between the versions, of course Kyogre and Groudon are split between the versions, and of course there's other version exclusive Pokemon, but I still think it's a pretty fun game to replay. Funny enough though, right behind Ruby and Sapphire, I am going to go ahead and put Omega Ruby and Omega Sapphire. Yes, we did get the introduction of Megas into this game. However, one of the big drawbacks to this specific remake is they took away the battle frontier. Why did they do that? Nobody asked for a battle resort. I think removing the battle frontier was probably one of the biggest fumbles that we've seen when it comes to a remake. Not to mention it does also once again get points knocked off because it is in the 3D art style versus the 2D sprites. But mostly it's the whole battle frontier thing because I'm still salty about that to this day. And I feel like everybody else is too, because why didn't they add it in a DLC or something? Right after Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, I am going to go ahead and put Pokemon Yellow. It's another Gen 1 remake. And it's a good game. It's a solid game. But it's also no Fire Red and Leaf Green. The main difference between Pokemon Yellow and Pokemon Red and Blue is that you can have Pikachu as a starter. Everything else is pretty much the same. It did also have some updated graphics, and it was kind of cool that they did introduce characters from the actual anime and blended the two canons together, since we did have appearances from Jesse and James, which I thought was kind of cute. They also updated the gym leaders' teams to reflect the anime teams, and there's a cute little surfing Pikachu minigame. So overall, the biggest difference between the yellow version and the red and blue versions is that they did incorporate a lot of the anime elements into the game, making it a pretty solid remake of the Gen 1 games. I just wish they had maybe tweaked the story a little bit more so that it wasn't just playing the same game plus anime characters / teams. Right next to Yellow, we are going to go ahead and put Crystal, which once again is a solid Gen 2 game, but the main differences between Crystal and Gold and Silver being that Suicune is much more prominent in Crystal, and you can also play as a female character. Not to mention we did get some updated graphics, like the little sprites actually moving, which is always nice, but nothing too overly extraordinary, so a solid C. Now another game that I'm going to put in C tier is once again going to be a little bit controversial, and I'm going to go ahead and put Pokemon Scarlet and Violet here. Now this is another game that I think is very overly hated, with people saying that this is the worst Pokemon game that's been released. I disagree. The fact that you have 3 different paths to take makes it so that you don't just button mash through the entire game like a more linear Pokemon game. It's one of the first Pokemon games that introduced an open world concept while also sticking to the same themes as a traditional Pokemon game, which is going through the gym challenges and beating the champion and becoming the champion yourself. So already you have a ton more to do just with the open world concept in addition to the regular linear Pokemon game theme. But like I said, there's 3 different paths that you can take, so so you also have to go fight the Titan Pokemon, which are like big bosses. And you also have to fight the quote-unquote evil team, which the Team Star bases were definitely some of the most challenging evil team battles that I've had to date. Not to mention, people wanted a harder Pokemon game, and since this is an open world game, you technically don't have to follow the game linearly, which means that if you want to go face the highest level gym while your Pokemon are 20 levels under level just because you feel like making it harder for yourself, go ahead, you're more than welcome to. Or you're also more than welcome to follow the more linear path and move up that way. Same thing goes for the Titan Pokemon, as well as the Team Star bases. You're basically able to pick and choose wherever you would like, and if you want to make the game harder, you can go challenge higher level foes. Not to mention, we had some great updates when it comes to the DLC, especially the Blueberry Academy, which focuses a lot more on doubles, which once again, this game is definitely part of the reason why competitive Pokemon has skyrocketed in popularity, since not only did they focus on doubles in the game itself, but they also gave us a ton of different quality of life updates for you to be able to get into actually training your Pokemon competitively. So for that reason, it does have a special place in my heart. However, I will say that the game is a little bit ugly. That's why it's in C tier. But overall, it is a fun game. And for the last game that's going in C tier, once again, this is going to ruffle some feathers. We're putting Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl here. Now, once again, I think these games are very overly hated, since they are technically just a one-for-one remake of the original Diamond and Pearl games. Is it a remake of Platinum? No. Would it have been better if it was a remake of Platinum? Yes, because it does severely lack all of the extra content that Platinum provides, which can make it a little bit of a boring game. However, I think it's a good, faithful remake of the original game, and it's still a linear, just baseline Pokemon game, so it is fun to replay it if I ever have some spare time. Not to mention, they did make a slight change in this game by making the gym leaders and the champion actually have competitively trained teams with IVs and EVs, as well as competitive movesets, which made the game a lot harder, which, like I said, that's something that Pokemon fans always ask for, so they gave it to you, and made Cynthia even more traumatizing, since her entire team has perfect IVs and is fully EV trained. I did just recently lose a Nuzlocke in this game to Cynthia's Spiritomb. Why did that thing do 4 billion damage? And personally, I kind of liked the chibi art style. It reminded me more of the actual sprites, which, like I said, if I had to pick between a 3D model and a sprite, I would pick a sprite any day. So this did make the game look a little bit more like a sprite. And I also think that it is a very aesthetically pleasing game to look at in comparison to something like Scarlet and Violet, at least for the more modern games. Moving on to D tier, the first game that we're going to put here is going to be Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. There isn't really a big difference between Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon and the original games, other than a new minigame with Mantine, the battle agency, which allows you to rent different Pokemon to try out different teams, and they did add gym battles, kind of, with the 4 little trainers that you can battle again each day. And of course, the reintroduction of Team Rocket as Team Rainbow Rocket in the post-game, which was a nice little nostalgia trip. But since those are the biggest changes between this and the originals, it doesn't really stand out. Right next to that, we're gonna go ahead and put the Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee games. Once again, this is yet another Gen 1 remake. It's more so like a Pokemon Yellow remake, since you get to choose either Pikachu or Eevee as your starter Pokemon, but I just found the game a little boring. I think aesthetically, it looks the best out of all of the modern Pokemon games. It's very visually appealing, however, also the catching mechanic was going to be a hard pass for me, because if I wanted to play Pokemon Go, I would just play Pokemon Go. So out of all of the Gen 1 remakes, this one definitely is the bottom tier for me. I do think that they did a good job of the walking animation, since just like its predecessor, Pokemon Yellow, your Pokemon are able to walk with you in the overworld, so I will give it that. The Pokemon do look pretty cute, and it is pretty cool that you can actually ride some of them. And right next to Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, we are going to go ahead and put the original Game Boy games, the red and blue games. The only reason that they're this low is they literally have just fallen victim to being games that were dealing with the technology that was available at the time in the 1990s. So they're just very slow, graphics are not good, and of course no physical special split. They just feel very clunky and dated now. If you're a retro gaming fan, of course you are going to enjoy playing them. They are the games that started it all. But going back and playing these games now, if you've been playing more modern Pokemon games for a really long time, these games feel like such a drag. Honestly, thank God for XP share, because having to switch your Pokemon in and out of battle is a literal no for me. I have been spoiled by experience share. Thank you, Pokemon X and Y, for giving us that. And then to finish off D tier, we are going to go ahead and put the Gold and Silver games. Once again, they just kind of fall victim to being old, and their remakes just kind of aged better just because of the visuals, the quality of life updates, the updated content, etc. But, you know, the Gen 2 games were great for the time that they came out in. I mean, at least Gold and Silver were in color, since they were on the Game Boy Color, versus the Red and Blue games, which were on the original Game Boy. Now, to finish off our tier list, moving on to F tier. At number 1, we're gonna go ahead and put the original Diamond and Pearl games, which is very controversial for me to say because Gen 4 is my favorite gen. However, you see how high Platinum is? Yeah, that's because Platinum is just 10 times better than Diamond and Pearl. Diamond and Pearl falls victim to all of the things that I said Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl fall victim to, which is literally just a lack of content. Personally, why would I replay Diamond and Pearl when I could simply just play Platinum, which is Diamond and Pearl just done much better, and it has much better replayability. Diamond and Pearl were a great start, but replaying the original Diamond and Pearl games is never going to be like at the top of my list. I'm just gonna go ahead and play Platinum instead. I'm sorry, Gen 4. I still love you, just not these games, just the ones that come after. Also, I am a Giratina stan, so we love that Giratina was introduced in Platinum. I am going to go ahead and put Sun and Moon next to that. I feel like that is a very popular opinion, actually. I don't think many people actually like the Sun and Moon games, especially because they did deviate from the whole gym leader thing, and we had like the little totem battles with like the Z crystals and everything. It is cool that you have both Z moves as well as Megas in this game, and of course the introduction of Ultra Beasts. But other than that, I want to say that I literally have like almost zero recollection of this game, which means it really didn't stand out in my brain, and I honestly don't really have a desire to go back and replay them. Especially not when I could just play Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon to get like a little bit of extra content. So therefore, the game is already not that great, and it's lacking content that its sequel has, so I just wouldn't reach for it personally. And lastly, to finish off F tier, another controversial opinion for me, I'm putting Legends Arceus here. I'm going to get yelled at. I always get yelled at when I say that I did not enjoy Legends Arceus. And I have many reasons, so hear me out. Hopefully somebody listens. Number 1, this game just feels like glorified Pokédex completion, which I have never completed a Pokédex in my entire life, because why would I? I just want to battle, collect the ones that I actually like and think are cute or cool, then go on my merry way and do all of the other content. I don't want to sit there and catch a Starly 4 times to fill out the Pokédex tasks. I understand that that is the premise of this game, is that you're creating the first Pokédex ever. However, in order for you to progress in the game, you literally have to fill out these Pokédex tasks, otherwise you cannot move forward, because you need to do these tasks in order to gain stars and progress in the storyline. I think the story is great. I like the boss battles. I think those are a really fun mechanic, and I'm glad that they're kind of keeping those battle aspects in the new ZA game, which looks much more fun in my opinion. But I gave this game 3 tries. I tried to play this game 3 times, and every single time it was not able to keep my attention. Do I think it's cool that it's open world? Yes. However, the lack of battles and the fact that it is very grind heavy in order for you to progress in the story makes it a game that is not likely for people to go back and play from the very beginning all over again. AKA, replayability for this game feels horrid. Now, in my opinion, I think that Scarlet and Violet was a better balance of open world as well as a traditional Pokemon game, which is why it's obviously higher on the list. But I don't know, I really just couldn't do it with Legends Arceus. It couldn't hold my attention, it felt way too grind heavy, the story was very slow paced, and I wasn't really a fan of the color palette of the game either, since visually the game didn't really catch my attention either, since everything was kind of like sepia, which I understand they were trying to make it like old-timey, but you can't have a game that feels very slow paced and is also not very visually appealing. It doesn't work. At least for me. So it's gonna go last place in F tier for me. Please do not attack me. Or do. I don't care. Do whatever you want. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Lastly, obviously XD is kind of just like floating. It's because I haven't played it yet. I have never played Gale of Darkness, so I have no opinion on it, but I heard that it's really good, and since the GameCube games are coming to the Switch too, you better believe that I will be playing it for the first time, because I've been told that I'm missing out. So let me know if that's true. Let me know if XD Gale of Darkness is as good as they say. If it's anything like Pokemon Colosseum, I'm sure I'll enjoy it. But until then, this is the current ranking for all of the past mainline, mostly mainline, Pokemon games. At least in my opinion. But like I keep mentioning, these are all just my personal opinions, so of course feel free to leave your opinions down below in the comments. And feel free to leave your rankings as well. But that is gonna go ahead and wrap it up for today's video. Hopefully you guys found this video entertaining, and if you did, I kindly suggest that you consider subscribing so that I can continue to make content for you guys. And if you are already subscribed and you would like another way to support the channel, feel free to check out the merch store. There is a link down below in the description that takes you to not only my merch store, but also all of my other socials so you can keep up with what I'm doing on a daily basis. But thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you to those of you who have joined the channel as members. I appreciate you all so much. I love you guys, and I will see you in the next video. Bye guys.